The House Committee on Natural Resources, Environment, Tourism, and Outdoor Recreation will come to order. Will the clerk please type the attendance?
Chair Pohutsky.
Here.
Representatives Hill.
Here.
Shannon.
Present.
Arbit.
Here.
McFall.
Here.
Pies.
Present.
Martin.
Here.
Preston.
Here.
Shriver. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Representative Arbit moves to approve the minutes from our previous meeting on March 16th. Hearing no objection, the minutes are approved. Okay, so during the meeting on March 9th, we heard testimony on House Bill 4083, which is sponsored by Rep. Rogers. Rep. Rogers is going to testify to a substitute that she has today. We will hold votes until more towards the end of committee. I know that we have a member who is on their way, and also, great, never mind that part then. But Rep. Rogers also has to go chair health policy. So I will let her give her testimony. We have a presentation, then we will come back to the votes on everything else. So thank you. Rep. Rogers, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Before you is an H2 substitute which incorporates a few changes to accommodate the dry cleaning industry's concerns with the bill. First, the timeline for phase out of PERC-based dry cleaning solvent has been extended from 5 years to 9 years. The manufacture of PERC-based dry cleaning solvent will be halted now December 1st, 2031. The sale of PERC-based solvents will be halted on June 1st, 2032, and the use of PERC-based solvents in dry cleaning will be ended on December 1st of 2032. So each of those dates is just moved out a few years. Adding an additional 4 years to the previous 5-year timeline provides significantly more time for dry cleaners to make the transition to safer dry cleaning solvents and processes. In addition, we have included the word equipment on page 2, line 25, to add further clarity that equipment would also be eligible under the cost-sharing grant program established in this bill. Finally, we added some technical language to ensure that the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy is the responsible entity for the fund and any subsequent audits. With these changes, we have been notified that the Michigan Cleaners Association is neutral on the bill, and I believe we have found a compromise that provides adequate time for the industry to adjust, but also provides a specific deadline where these dangerous and expensive to clean up chemicals will be phased out of use in dry cleaning in Michigan. Thank you for your consideration of the substitute, and as Chair mentioned, I apologize that after your questions, I do need to run to health policy, which I chair.
Does anyone have any questions for Representative Rogers on the substitute she's offering, or anything more broad? No? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Representative. Thank you for making time. Okay, so next up we will have a presentation from Bill Whitley, who is representing the Composting Council of Michigan. So if you'd like to come forward, Bill. And then again, we will have our votes at the end of committee. So thank you all. Thank you.
Bill Whitley. I own Spurk Industries, a commercial composting business based in Wixom, and I'm an equity partner in Migraine, Michigan, a food scraps hauling business with a service area that covers all of southern lower Michigan. I'm here today on behalf of the Composting Council of Michigan. Composting Council of Michigan represents public and private composters across the state. We also count equipment manufacturers and large compost users amongst our members. I also sit on the Governor's Solid Waste and Recycling Advisors Group, the Executive Committee of the Michigan Organics Council, the Board of Directors of the Michigan Recycling Coalition. Through many years of work, we were happy to see the cultivation of our efforts to modernize waste management by updating and overhauling the regulations in solid waste law, known as Part 115 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. This 8-bill package was signed into law.
Mr. Whitley, I'm sorry, I don't believe the mic is on, or if it is, it's not quite. Great, thank you, sorry
How about that? Is that better?
Perfect, thank you.
So we appreciate the passage of that set of bills, and we're in active discussion with Eagle on the implementation of the changes and look forward to their continued cooperation in the design and development of the new general permitting process called for in the law. My goal today is to give you some insight into what composting is and how we benefit the state both economically and environmentally. As you may already know, composting is a natural process of biological decomposition in which organic materials break down in the presence of oxygen. Composting exists on a variety of scales, from small backyard tumblers, which hold only a couple of gallons, to large-scale commercial operations as large as 40 acres in Michigan. We are all working when we compost to facilitate a process that has occurred in nature since the beginning of time. And a simple way to think about what composting is to think about the forest and to think about the life cycle of a tree. As a tree grows, the nutrients required for that tree to grow are drawn from the soil. The tree grows, the tree lives, the tree dies, it falls down in place, and it begins to decompose. The ground beneath that tree is covered in leaves and branches and the trunk of the tree. But if you scrape away that top layer, if you look beneath the leaves or underneath the trunk, you will find rich black soil, which is full of the nutrients and organic matter that are required for and are the foundation of the next generation of plant life. In the forest example, the leaves stay and the trees stay. It breaks down in place to feed that next generation. And while that is the case in nature, our human activity changes the equation. When the leaves on the trees at my house drop in the fall, we place them in yard waste bags, we place the bags at the end of the driveway, and then they disappear. And in the minds of many residents and citizens of the state, that's the end of the process, but for we composters, that is the beginning. That material comes to composters, and we composters capture those organics, and we use highly specialized equipment, carefully controlled processes, and we accelerate the natural breakdown that would occur in the forest to create a high-quality finished compost used to create healthy soils for the next generation of plant life. Those soils are reapplied across Michigan at organic farms, nurseries, and in a variety of landscaping applications at both the residential and commercial scale. And so I brought a little show and tell because it always helps. What we do, we take this, right? Like we take the grass and the leaves and the twigs and the branches and we turn it into this. We're making new soil, and that's what we as composters are doing. Because those leaves from my home, that tree debris is taken away from my property and is not returned into the soil from which that tree grew, over time, the quality of that soil, as you keep removing the leaves and removing the leaves, the quality of that soil will diminish, and with that diminishment in the soil, the ability of it to provide life to future plants. And so we have to replenish the nutrients in that soil if we want to continue to grow plants in that same ground. At a very high level, there's two common ways that you can replenish the soil. One method is synthesized chemical fertilizers, and the other method is compost, right? Like you can go to a big box store, you can buy fertilizer with NPK, you can put that down on your lawn, or you can apply compost, just as nature intended. Compost is nature's way to grow. Compost is always locally made, annually renewable, bio-based, organic, and 100% recycled. We simultaneously reduce pressure on landfills and reliance on petroleum and the negative environmental, human health, and social impacts generated by both. Compost helps to ensure the materials used in our watersheds are made from native or adapted materials and close the loop on nutrient and carbon cycles on a community level. And I'll talk more about the watersheds later in this testimony. Our composting industry was really kickstarted in 1994 when legislation that required yard waste to be composted went into effect. And since that time, there's been significant growth and evolution in the industry, both in Michigan as well as across the country. The U.S. Composting Council has developed certification programs for operations managers and for finished composting product. Many of the members of the Composting Council of Michigan today produce a certified product which is tested regularly for nutrient content, heavy metal contamination, pathogens, and over 25 other parameters to demonstrate that we produce a consistent, safe, and beneficial product. Michigan currently has over 150 compost sites registered with EGLE, and those are comprised of both public and private operations. I want to point out that compost operations and compost businesses are local businesses, that we are environmentally sustainable and economically sustainable. we're a local business. I talked about the leaves that fall at my house, and I'm a resident of Representative Arbut's district, and like the leaves of most of the homes in your district, those leaves travel just 11 miles down the road to Spurt Industries for processing. Last year at Spurt, we received over 60,000 cubic yards of organic materials, and we produced over 60,000 yards of soils. And to put that in perspective, 60,000 cubic yards, if spread on a football field, would be 30 feet tall. That's at one of the 150 sites. All of this organic material that came to my site originated from, and the soil was used at a location within 1 hour of the site. We are all hyper-local businesses, and that's true of all of the sites across the state. We are environmentally sustainable businesses. Compost is produced without any chemical additives of any kind. So we take in just these organic materials, grass, leaves, branches, wood chips, and other organics. We combine them in defined recipes, we turn, we mix them, we mechanically separate to remove any non-organic items, any rocks or any plastic that may have been in the stream. Completely organically, no chemicals of any kind. The aerobic processing of these organics prevents methane generation that would occur were the organics to be disposed of in the landfill. As I'm sure you know, methane is a greenhouse gas that, according to the EPA, is 25 times more potent as a climate change impact. The application of compost to soil helps plants to grow. It improves nutrient uptake from the soil. And importantly, it increases the water holding capacity of the soil. You put that together and you reduce the need for chemical fertilizers, you reduce the need for irrigation, you reduce the volume of stormwater runoff after a rain event, and you actually clean the water that does run off as stormwater from a rain event. And I'll touch later on how those benefits can be beneficial to the state. We are economically sustainable businesses. Industry studies have shown that there are strong economic benefits to composting, and when compared with the landfilling of yard waste that was the case prior to the 1994 law, composting creates 4 jobs for every 1 that created previously. Additionally, because we are such local businesses, we are fortunate to be resistant to many of the issues that affect recycling efforts of other commodities. In plastics recycling, for example, some feedstocks must be transported to Asia to be processed into new goods. And so issues such as the price of oil, the availability of shipping containers, geopolitics, tariffs, all can have significant impacts on the viability of a program that requires goods to be sent to Asia. As all of our feedstocks are sourced from and products used within a 1-hour drive of our locations, we are immune from many of those issues. I wanted to point out also that over the years since 1994, there have been attempts to overturn this landfill ban on yard waste, and all of us in the industry appreciate the continued support from the legislature on this critical piece of law. Composting is critical to the achievement of Michigan's recycling goals and is a key component of the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan. There is no way for us to reach our 2030 or 2050 goals or the 45% diversion target set out in Part 115 without a strong composting industry. The 2021 gap analysis that was conducted by Eagle as a part of the Next Cycle Michigan program provides some valuable data on the waste stream as a whole, as well as the portion that's currently being captured for recycling. And it gives great insight into where composting is today and the opportunities that we have in front of us. While we aren't always in the forefront of people's mind, we are very important to the recycling picture in the state. The data shows that the organics we compost are the 2nd largest stream currently composted in Michigan. Paper recycling is first, and organics are second. We are larger than plastic, glass, or metal recycling currently. That same study looked at the whole waste stream to say, of this stream, what is recyclable by some method? How much plastic, how much glass, how much metal, how much organics can be recycled? The analysis found that 38% of the Michigan waste stream is comprised of organics and could, in theory, be composted. We're currently capturing about half of that. The overwhelming majority of the yard waste in the state is being composted as the law calls for, but there's significant opportunities which remain, and the largest such opportunity is for the capture and collection of food waste. When compared with the yard waste, there's an equal amount of food waste generated in the state, but we currently capture only about 1% of this food. The opportunity exists to double the amount of compost which is produced in this state. And as I introduce the idea of food waste composting, if we pause for a moment and think back to the example of the tree, when we talk about composting food, we're now talking about composting. Imagine the tree's an apple tree, and now we're talking about composting the apple. We often might think about the apple as being food, but the real, pure biological purpose of that apple is not about food for you and I. The purpose of that apple is to provide nutrients for the seeds inside the apple so that we grow new apple trees. And so the addition of food and the addition of those nutrients to compost increases the volume of compost that we can produce, but importantly, improves the quality of the compost through the addition of those nutrients. Any type of food can be composted, whether it be fruit, vegetable, dairy, or animal-based. Broadly, anything that was once alive can be composted. Composting is the completion of the earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust circle of life. Michigan composters are working to increase the volume of food which is collected from food distribution centers, restaurants, schools, hospitals, and individual residences so that it may be composting. As an example, Representative Arbit, if you were to visit Sylvan Table in the district for dinner, all of the food scraps generated from the preparation of your meal would be separated and collected for composting. Some of the food that you would eat is grown in greenhouses on site in soil that has been supplemented by compost produced from those same food scraps. The composting industry is helping to create and empower a farm to table to farm local circular economy within the state. To further strengthen our industry and to better outcomes for Michigan's environment, the Composting Council of Michigan is working on two major projects currently. The first is to allow for marijuana waste to be processed by licensed composters. When Michigan licensed medicinal and later recreational marijuana use, the rules for licensing were written in such a way that made it impossible for the waste generation by cultivation, things like roots and leaves and stems. It made it impossible for them to be picked up and composted like we do other organic wastes. Despite those roots, leaves, and stems not containing THC, when it comes to disposal and transportation, it is treated the same as material that does contain THC. Bills were introduced last session with input from both the department and from industry to address this problem and were passed out of the House unanimously, but unfortunately we ran out of time before they made it any further, and we plan to have those bills reintroduced soon. A second initiative that we are working on is a pilot program to address what we perceive to be one of the biggest threats to Michigan's tourism economy. And those are water quality issues that impact the ability of the residents to enjoy and use the waters of the state. There are two significant water quality issues which the use of compost can be a significant mitigating factor in preventing. Those two are algal blooms caused by excessive fertilizer runoff and E. coli pollution as a result of combined sewer system overflows. It is long known that people flock to Michigan for our pristine waterways and lakes, and those tourism dollars are a major driver for local and state economies, as you well know. Beach closures and lost revenues are only going to get worse if we don't address this problem. We are working to pilot here in Michigan a program that mirrors a successful initiative undertaken in the late 1990s in Washington State. At the time there, excessive development had changed the characteristics of the stormwater runoff into the streams to the point that the salmon were not spawning as they used to, and it posed a significant threat to their local economy. They researched the problem, they looked at what the changes were and ways that it could be addressed, and they found that compost could reverse this condition. They developed a program that they called Soils for Salmon, and it instituted best management practices which included the application of compost to achieve a 5% organic matter content in soil, and they were able to reverse the pollution in their streams and save their salmon population. We in Michigan can learn from these successes in Washington State and mirror this program in our own way. Just as they developed soils for salmon, we must landscape for the lakes. And I look forward to, as time goes on, sharing more information with you about this vital program. But with that, thank you for your time today. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to share the work being done by Michigan composters and the opportunities to grow the industry and to improve the environment within the state. We look forward to working with you and with your colleagues in the time to come to address these important issues, and I welcome any questions that you may have.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Whitley? Representative McFall?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You had mentioned that there were groups that were trying to overturn it. Can you tell me who those groups are?
Yeah, it's generally related to where the material used to go. So when it left a landfill and came to us, it was a loss for that group.
Minority Vice Chair Martin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Country Oaks is a commercial scale place in Burton, in my district.
Yeah, I know Mark well.
Good. And I haven't gone back and looked after winter now, but they've been using their compost, the degradation of the product, as a source for geothermal heating.
That's correct.
And running a greenhouse and stuff. So, do you know any other commercial activities like that?
Mark is the only operation in the state who's currently doing that. So to expand a little bit, when these organic materials break down, they generate their own heat. And so Mark has installed a system at his site that captures the heat out of the compost pile, and he is using that heat to heat two shops on the building, his office and a storage barn, as well as a greenhouse. That is all being heated off of the energy that is generated by the natural breakdown of these products. Mark's the only one doing that today. I am currently engaged with the same company that Mark hired to build his site, and we're conducting an analysis about putting the same system in at my location. And I know that there are others looking at the same technology.
Representative Pies?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I used to do some vermicomposting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if that's being done commercially anywhere in the state on any significant scale. And, well, if you could answer that.
Yeah, so there are a couple different vermicomposting operations that are successful and ongoing and sustainable commercial operations. Michigan State University also has a vermicomposting program, which is part of the university, but an ongoing sustainable program. There's a gentleman in the Novi area who's manufacturing equipment to support vermicomposting. The largest commercial scale vermicomposter that we know is Wormies out of the Grand Rapids area.
Oh, okay.
And he's doing quite a program of residential and commercial collection of food waste and bringing it back for vermicomposting and then selling that soil back. So yes, it is happening.
Okay, and you had said something about methane gas and just something short, and I was wondering if you could repeat that.
Yeah, so when organic materials break down in the presence of oxygen, that aerobic decomposition, methane is not produced.
Okay.
If you take these same organics and you bury them in a landfill where there is no oxygen, the materials still break down, but because there's no oxygen, that breakdown process will produce methane gas.
Okay. Thank you. Just real quick, I wanted to explain that vermicomposting is composting with worms. Thank you.
Vice Chair Hill?
Thank you. Very informative. And I've also I've been to a facility when I lived downstate. I helped with my community garden, and there was acres and acres and acres of composting being done, sort of near Wixom, I think it was.
Okay.
But it's phenomenal to see that scale downstate. In our more forested areas of the Michigan, what is the potential, and it seems like it's a different operation, I would imagine, thinking about our northern areas with the forest and with, of course, longer winters. And I know that our wastewater treatment facility in Marquette has had a significant issue with managing its solid waste byproduct. given the scale of what happens in the wintertime and everything freezing.
Correct.
So, two questions. The question of chemicals and the forever chemicals that we're particularly concerned about, which are even showing up in our wastewater treatment plants, and maybe you can speak to that or maybe you can't in terms of PFAS and things like that. And then the question of in our more forested areas, how does composting would work in those situations?
Sure. So first on PFAS, PFAS right now is everywhere, right? It's in probably my bloodstream. It is in our wastewater streams. In some parts of the country, those biosolid streams from wastewater plants are composted. We as an industry are certainly very cognizant of and aware of and looking at and working on making sure that PFAS doesn't enter our sites. I didn't speak much today about, but when you compost food, you have compostable cups and plates and forks and knives. There's a certification program for that, for all products which enter our sites, that they're tested, that they do not contain any PFAS. So at no point in the process do any of us composters add PFAS. But if PFAS enters our stream as an input, it will exit. It will still be there at the end of our process. So from the industry perspective, we look upstream for the solutions of that process to first the manufacturing of those chemicals and then the items that they're used upon. As far as biosolids and composting through the winter months, composting even in northern Michigan is a process that, because we generate our own heat, can be performed outside through the dead of winter. We take temperatures on our compost piles, and even on the coldest days of winter, the compost piles at my location will be 140 or 150 degrees on the inside of the pile. So you can keep that going right through the winter. It is a way to manage that waste, but there are regulatory issues in Michigan that prevent some of that. That's probably a topic for an offline conversation. As far as composting in the more rural wooded forestry areas, it can exist. It does exist. There are operations doing it. Economics issues drive some of that. When I lived in a more rural neighborhood before I moved into Representative Arbutt's district, we didn't collect our leaves. We had a leaf blower and we blew them back into the woods. And so that is nature's way, right? That it really ideally could stay right where it grew. And so that material does break down, but there are food waste and composting efforts across the UP, and Petoskey has a great program, Traverse City has a great program, as well as there's work going on in Marquette and other places in the UP.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Representative Arbit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here, Bill. I feel like part of our job in the legislature, we do a lot of behavioral economics. We try to incentivize good behavior. We try to incentivize, increase adoption of good programs, good, things that we see, to try to better the state, and also build capacity, right, where there needs to be. And I'm very glad that you're here today, because I will be honest, I did not know. I mean, I knew what composting was, but I didn't know about all of the sort of manifold benefits that it brings in a lot of different areas. And I wanted to just, I know you outlined, two sort of, avenues for legislative action at the end, and I wanted to sort of pick your brain just a little bit on, particularly on the food waste piece. From my perspective, what sort of, popped up in my mind when you were talking about that is, there's, I think you said, only about 1% of food waste in Michigan is composted. What would you recommend, and what sort of additional work would we need to do as a legislature to build the capacity so that way we can see increased adoption of composting of food waste in the state of Michigan, and what sort of legislative action would you think would be potentially viable?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a number of things that are going on now to try to increase that. There are a number of us that are out collecting food and trying to grow those businesses and investing in new collection vehicles and investing in marketing and awareness. as well as the state is pushing that, right? So Eagle's Next Cycle program has an entire track on flows, foods, liquids, and other organic wastes, which is designed specifically to try to encourage and increase that activity. I'd love the opportunity to discuss some of the specific legislation offline. There is legislation that has gone into place, I think, in 13 states now regarding some different ways of mandated or incentivized food waste diversion. We have to be careful in the way that we do it. I was in California in January at the National Composting Conference, and California put in a very strict program requiring everything to be diverted, and they're now having very significant contamination problems. And what is most important to me first is that we can produce high quality compost. When this stuff goes back out to be reapplied, I need to be able to produce a product that can go on a certified organic farm and grow healthy food. And so we can do that with food, and we can do that by capturing food, but we need to make sure that we do it in the right way, that we crawl, walk, run.
Yeah.
And we can do that here and learn from what's happened in other places. I'd love the opportunity to discuss that with you.
I look forward to.
Thank you.
We can meet at Sylvan Table if you want.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Representative Pies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I found it really interesting that our Minority Vice Chair, Rep. Martin, mentioned geothermal heating. So that made me wonder if composting industry is getting any pushback from energy companies.
We haven't yet. It's a great source for us at our individual locations, but we really don't produce in excess beyond what we could use ourselves on site. And so we don't move the needle for them, but it is still a valuable energy input that we can capture and use on site.
Do you foresee that as something that, excuse me, that might be a problem later down the line if we increase?
I don't think that it will be. I don't think that we will be able to produce enough energy that way to affect their industries.
Okay, I was thinking about the 1% cap that energies have on off-grid, but that might be a discussion for another time also. Thank you so much.
Representative McFall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have more of a comment versus a question. When it comes to food waste, one of the things that we have to make sure that we're keeping an eye on with food waste is that we're not harming organizations like Forgotten Harvest and those types of things. So I just want to make sure if there is any discussions about legislation or anything like that, that is taken into account because they do rely on some of those foods. So.
Absolutely, and we consider organizations like Forgotten Harvest and other food rescue networks to be partners of ours, and we as composters try to follow the EPA food waste hierarchy, which says first, if food is edible, it should be eaten by a person, right? Like that is the first priority, and then the second priority, if the food is able to be consumed by an animal, that's the second link in the hierarchy, and if it's not able to be consumed by a person or an animal, that's when we should start looking at composting it. And yeah, we're strong believers, and we're in discussion with some of the food rescue operations to talk about, okay, so you brought it in, and you got most of it back out to folks, but some of it didn't make it, right? Some of it spoiled, and so how do we make sure that those get recaptured to make the loop? But certainly first, it goes to Forgotten Harvest.
Great. Are there any other questions? All right. Seeing no further questions. Oh, I'm so sorry. Rep. Shriver, go on ahead.
Is marijuana waste able to be processed by unlicensed composters at this point?
It is not legally allowed to be processed by unlicensed composters today, and we don't propose that it should be able to in the future.
Okay, so you're proposing that marijuana waste is able to be processed exclusively by licensed composters only?
Correct, by those approved and registered and licensed by the state, as all of us composters are supposed to be.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Whitley. I greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right. So before we vote on anything, I had a couple cards to read in. Michelle Batora from the Michigan Cleaners Association does not wish to speak and is neutral on House Bill 4083. And Yusuf Rabi from the Michigan Nurses Association does also not wish to speak, but is supportive of the bill. So now I will take a motion to adopt the H2 substitute to House Bill 4083. Motion is made by Vice Chair Hill. Would the clerk please call the vote?
On the motion to adopt the substitute, Chair Putsky.
Yes.
Representatives Hill.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
Arvit.
Yes.
McFall.
Yes.
Pies.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Shriver.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays, 0 passes. The substitute is adopted.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Next up, we have 3 amendments to the substitute. First up, we have amendment number 1 by Representative Preston. Did you want to speak to your amendment?
Yes, thank you. The violation of $10,000, is going to be implemented by Eagle. They will have their license revoked. I think it's an egregious amount. They're already, if they do get left out of the loop as far as compliance, and their license is revoked, a $10,000 penalty on top of having to get their business back in line and in compliance, I just think is a bit onerous, especially when you're looking at somebody that's probably just a mom and pop operation that's going to be looking to try to get themselves back in compliance. So I'm just looking to move it from 10,000 to 1,000.
Are there questions for the representative? I actually have one. I understand the thought behind that, but given the fact that the affected industries are neutral, can you explain a little bit about your intent if they seem okay with it?
Just being a small business owner, it's easy for organizations that represent to be neutral, but for individual operators to be left out of the conversation. That happened to myself several times as a truck stop owner. So a lot of times things that happen here don't really proliferate out to the small mom and pop that's really just struggling to stay afloat. So, you're looking at a situation where they're going to have their license pulled. They're going to be shut down. They're going to have a lot of issues to go through to get back up and running again. So just putting them on a platform to get back up and running is the only thing I'm looking to address here.
That makes sense, but given the fact that part of these fines go to that buyback program and the grants that are also in the bill, would a tiered system not have been better so that we could fully fund the grant program but also not overtly impact, disproportionately impact smaller businesses?
Well, and I think that's, it's a catch-22 because, this is most likely going to disproportionately affect the ones that are the most disconnected from the organizations, from the statewide organizations, the national organizations, and are just working under maybe an antiquated set of rules or a mindset that they just weren't aware of, and then all of a sudden, wham, and comes Eagle, and so.
Was anyone from the industry contacted about that?
No.
Okay, no, great. Does anyone else have any other questions? Representative Pies.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Maybe I'm misunderstanding this. If the business has had 9 years to get in compliance, why should they be fined less?
And that's under the assumption that they know. So, an assumption, you know what they say about assuming. I'm under the assumption that, and the fact that they will lose their license. So they're going to get put out of business until they come back into compliance. On my end, why add insult to injury by levying such an egregious fine? They're either going to go out of business or they're going to retool, come back into compliance, and reopen. Because you got a licensing aspect as well as a penalty, a financial penalty aspect here. So I just think the licensing revocation is probably going to be, well, it would be for any small business owner enough to either make you come into compliance or you're going to call it quits.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I'm sorry, Representative, did you make a motion to move your amendment? I didn't hear that part.
Yes, please.
Great. Representative Preston moves their amendment. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
On the motion to adopt the Preston Amendment, Chair Putsky.
No.
Representatives Hill,
No.
Shannon.
No.
Arbit,
No.
McFall,
No.
Pies,
No.
Martin,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Shriver.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 3 yeas, 6 nays, 0 passes. The amendment is not adopted.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Next up, we have Amendment 2, offered by, just so that there's clarity on this, originally it was supposed to be Representative Shriver. It is now Representative Martin, just so everyone knows which ones we're talking about. Do you want to speak to your amendment?
It's just simply making a 100% grant versus defining the cost share program.
Okay. Does anybody have questions about this? The one thing, and I know this is a little bit tough because we don't always, not always, we don't have a fiscal analysis on amendments, but do we have a ballpark guess of how much it would cost for that to be a 100% grant program?
I did not ask for that. It usually is provided, but it's just piggyback what Representative Preston said. These are small business owners, so a grant program would just for the entire cost.
And I'm sorry, did we have another question from over here? No, answered? Okay. Very well.
And I would move the adoption of that amendment.
Thank you very much. Minority Vice Chair Martin moves her amendment. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to adopt the Martin Amendment, Chair Putsky.
No.
Representatives Hill,
No.
Shannon.
No.
Arbit,
No.
McFall,
No.
Pies,
No.
Martin.
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Shriver.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 2 yeas, 7 nays, 0 passes. The amendment is not adopted.
Thank you very much. Finally, we have Amendment 3, also offered by Minority Vice Chair Martin. Representative, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Madam Chair, there's so much of this testimony was always about dangerous and hazardous materials. If we're concerned about the dry cleaning industry and the workers there, I asked the question in testimony if that product is used in other industries, and the answer, of course, was yes. And if it's such a hazard to Michigan residents that work in dry cleaning, it should be a hazard and recognize a hazard to every Michigander. So the amendment would ban manufacturing, selling, or using it in the state of Michigan.
That's great. And I'm actually, I agree with you. I think that we should ban it all across the state. Did you speak with any of the, because I know, we had a couple folks who are now neutral on the bill. So did you speak to any of those folks that represent those industries?
The Chemical Association, I did explain my standing on that, just so that they would know and not be surprised with this amendment.
Okay, great. I'm going to assume we have folks from there. Would that make you opposed to this bill as written if that amendment was included?
Most likely.
Okay, great, thank you. Again, being supportive of actually outright banning this, I do have just a couple concerns. There's mention, obviously, of dry cleaning throughout the bill, and this amendment only takes it out of the first page. So by not dealing with it elsewhere, so page 2, line 19, line 28, it still stipulates that the funding, like the grants could only go to dry cleaning facilities. The disposal language still only applies to dry cleaning facilities. So I guess my question is, why is this only changing the first page when I think the most important aspects of it are actually on the second page if we're trying to make this equitable?
Yes, Madam Chair, and this bill was for dry cleaning, so that's why I identified dry cleaning at first part. The funding and so forth, if I'd have to rewrite the entire bill for the millions of dollars to clean up the entire state from brownfields from a hazardous material, and we already have bills and laws in place for that type of thing. But I just want to make sure that it's addressed of the hazard of this. I downloaded the MSDS and for what type of safety precautions have to be used around this chemical and handled, and it does appear to be very hazardous.
Agreed, but this deals with this fund specifically in this bill. So I understand your point about having to rewrite the bill, but I think it would really just go to changing the removing dry cleaning throughout the bill, correct? If that is your...
Madam Chair, you could propose that amendment.
I mean, I could, but I would prefer to work with the sponsor. So I guess my point is I support the spirit of this amendment, but I think it is important to work collaboratively to make sure that we can can address this. And I'm hoping that this isn't the end of this conversation, because I would very much like to see some legislation that does exactly this, but doesn't cut out other industries from the benefits of the fund, you know, per se, and then also from the discussion. So I appreciate your work on this.
To go forward now, Madam Chair, I would move adoption of the amendment.
Representative Martin moves their amendment. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
On the adoption of the Martin Amendment, Chair Putsky.
No.
Representatives Hill.
No.
Shannon.
No.
Arvid.
No.
McFall.
No.
Pies.
No.
Martin.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Shriver.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 2 yeas, 7 nays, 0 passes. The amendment is not adopted.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. There being no further amendments, I will now take a motion to report House Bill 4083 as sub H2 with recommendation. Motion made by Vice Chair Hill. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
On motion to report with substitute H2, Chair Putsky.
Yes.
Representatives Hill.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
Arvid.
Yes.
McFall.
Yes.
Pies.
Yes.
Martin.
No.
Preston.
Yes.
Shriver.
No.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 2 nays, 0 passes. The bill is reported with recommendation as substitute H2.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We have no absent members to excuse, so there being no objection, never mind, there's nothing to deal with there. I do that every week. Thank you all for bearing with me. There being no further business for the committee will stand adjourned.